Whenever we study a text in English, we have to ask three main questions. Why did the writer compose that text? What is the text saying? And how does the writer get this message across? Answering these easy questions will help you develop a deep understanding of any text. First, we have to ask why the writer composed that text. In other words, what is the purpose of the book or the play or the poem? Sometimes this can be obvious. Think about fairy tales. They often try to convey a very simple moral message, like in The Boy Who Cried Wolf. That's the purpose of the text, to teach a moral lesson. Other texts might have a different purpose. They might be designed to entertain you, provide information, or persuade you to do something. Next, think about what the message of the text is. In The Boy Who Cried Wolf, the author of that story clearly wanted to teach kids not to lie. That's what the story's underlying message is. The third question is how the writer gets that message across. In The Boy Who Cried Wolf, the author doesn't just say, "Hey kids, don't lie please." No, the story doesn't tell you its message, it shows you its message. The author shows us that bad things will happen if we lie. This is far scarier and more persuasive to naughty little children than just telling them not to do something. Remember, in English, it always comes back to asking why an author wrote something, what they are saying, and how they say it. Often, composers use a similar set of tools to show, and not just tell, us their message. These tools are called techniques. You'll be hearing a lot more of that word. So to really break it down, when we ask what a writer's message is and how they convey it, we are trying to work out how a writer uses certain techniques to get their message across. This lesson will introduce you to the main techniques that writers use to deliver their message. With this knowledge, you'll be able to figure out how composers convey a message. You can also start using these tools when you write too. So let's start with some common techniques. The first is a metaphor. A metaphor is when you describe something in a way that is not literally true, but still captures the idea of what you are trying to say. Here is an example. When you are really angry and say that your head is going to explode, you don't literally mean that your head will blow up. Rather, you emphasize your anger by evoking the related ideas of heat and force and aggression in the image of the explosion. Here's another example of a metaphor. Our new dog is a fountain of joy, or a basket of happiness. Obviously, this dog can't physically be a fountain or a basket. But we might use a metaphor here to make our description seem extra emotive. Doesn't it sound way more powerful to say your head is going to explode rather than simply saying, "I am angry," or "she's a basket of happiness," instead of just, "she's joyful"? This is because the metaphor makes you think of powerful ideas and images that get the message across more vividly. That's what makes metaphors such a useful technique. They show us something, like anger or happiness, far more effectively than just telling us it's there. A similar technique is the simile. It's like a metaphor in the sense that it's used to describe something in a non-literal way. But whereas in a metaphor you say, "my head will explode," for example, in a simile, you say, "it feels like my head is going to explode," or that it's as if my head will explode. Another type of simile is when you say, for example, "as cool as a cucumber," or "as strong as a lion." It uses words or phrases such as like or as to make a comparison between two things. Again, this is not supposed to be literal. We know, for example, that no one is really as strong as a lion. But by saying that someone is, you immediately imagine the strength of a lion and thus that the person being compared to one must be, well, really strong. Get it? Have a think about how you would describe someone using a simile. What comparisons would you use to show that someone is very kind, a super fast runner, or always shy? Another technique is hyperbole. You'll find it everywhere, whether it be in newspaper articles, novels, plays, or poems. It's basically a fancy word for exaggeration. A great example is when we say, "It's freezing outside." Sure, it might be cold, but nothing's frozen. Obviously, though, it's more evocative to say it's freezing than "it's kind of cold today." Hyperboles are a great way of making language more powerful and memorable, which makes us more likely to understand its message. Take another example. You might say that you raced to the shops after school. You didn't literally put on your track shoes and sprint to the shops at the sound of a starting gun, but using these expressions, even if they aren't literally true, are way better at getting across the idea you want to convey, like your speed in this case. So remember to look out for hyperbole as another technique composers use to convey meaning. You might have also heard of personification. Personification is when a composer gives human traits to an animal or an inanimate object. For example, you might read in a book that the leaves on the trees were dancing. Wow, the author has given the leaves the human ability to dance. Why did the author use personification here? Well, we associate dancing with beauty and celebration. The author then is probably personifying the leaves as dancers to convey the beauty of the tree or of nature in general. Or perhaps the author is trying to suggest that the character looking at these dancing leaves feels joy in this landscape. By contrast, if the leaves were described as rotting corpses, that'd also be personification because it would describe the leaves like humans, but instead of thinking about beauty and celebration, you would picture the landscape as cold and hostile, or the character in it as lonely or scared. Now imagine that you are describing some trees and want to show fear or anxiety in the story. How would you personify the trees to show this? Or what if you wanted to create a sense of mystery and excitement? Personification is a fun tool that writers use to convey deeper ideas and emotions. Another common technique is symbolism. A symbol is an image or object that represents a deeper idea. Symbols are everywhere. Your school logo is a symbol of your school. Our flag is a symbol of our nation. A trophy is a symbol of your success in sport. In the texts you study in English, look out for more subtle symbols, almost like clues that the composer inserts to help create meaning or a message. Here are some easy examples. In Harry Potter, we immediately get the feeling that the people in Slytherin are not going to be very nice. Why? Well, there's a snake in its badge, a well-known symbol of evil and cunning. Or what about the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood? Wolves symbolise cruelty, so we instantly know that something bad is going to happen when Red Riding Hood starts chatting to the wolf in the forest. See what I mean? Writers use symbols like snakes and wolves because we already understand what they mean. An author can use them to instantly make us think about a deeper concept like evil or hope without ever having to mention these ideas directly. Take a look at these symbols. What idea do you think is represented by the colour white? A handshake, a heart, a bright light, or a skull? Can you think of some other common symbols in texts or real life? Now let's turn to another technique called a motif. A motif is a recurring image or symbol that keeps on popping up throughout the text. Think about the bat signal in Batman, that spotlight that gets shone into the sky when the people of Gotham need their superhero. If it appeared in the sky once, it might just be a symbol of Gotham's need for help or Batman's importance to the city. But the way it repeats throughout the movies turns it into a motif, deepening its meaning. The more and more the bat signal is shone into the sky, the more and more we realise how bad the situation in Gotham is. See how this is a much more powerful message about how the city is in constant crisis rather than just in need of one-off help? The way the bat signal recurs as a motif instead of just once as a symbol helps convey that richer story of the city's struggle over time. Also, motifs might subtly change meaning throughout a text. Take the bat signal example again. Usually, Batman swoops down and comes to the rescue. But later in the story, he hangs up his cape and ignores the bat signals. Now, the motif of the bat signal, hovering unanswered in the clouds, changes its meaning. It no longer tells us how Gotham is protected by a superhero saviour. It now demonstrates how no one is there anymore to save the city. Think about some movies or books that you've encountered recently. They're probably full of motifs. For example, when Harry Potter's scar stings, that's a motif, warning us that Voldemort is growing in power. When Luke Skywalker keeps hearing voices saying, "Use the Force," that's a motif too. Nice work! You've just learnt some of the most common techniques that composers use in their texts. So far, we've covered symbolism, metaphors, similes, hyperbole, personification, and motifs. Now you're ready to read and understand any text that comes your way. Be on the lookout for what the composer is saying and how they use the tools of language to convey their message. We hope you enjoyed this Schooling Online production. For more easy lessons on Stage 4 English Essentials, check out English Basics Lesson 2.